Okay, lesson 32.4 is on standard deviation. Standard deviation is defined as how spread out a set of numbers are. So if we have a set of data, standard deviation is a way of us knowing how spread out all the numbers in the data set are. Standard deviation is calculated by taking the square root of the variance. But we need to first figure out, well, what is variance? So we're going to figure the variance out by doing the following. We're going to take the mean of the data set, and I'm going to call that M. So M is going to be the mean or the average of the set of data. I'm going to call the number of terms that's in the data set N. So we'll say N is the size of the data set. And we're going to call each of these values x1, x2, x3, and so on, all the way up to whatever the last term is, which is xn. The formula goes like this. We take, in the numerator of the variance, we take each number in the data set, so I'm going to call that x1, for example, and find the difference between the number and the mean and square it. Then you're going to add it to the difference between the second number in the data set, we'll call that x2, the difference between that and the mean, and square that. And so on. It depends how many numbers are in the data set. This could happen a certain number of times. And finally, we're going to add the very last number in the data set. I'm going to call the very last number x sub n, subtract the average, and square it. Again, n refers to how many terms or how many values are in the data set, so we're going to divide by that. So let's do an example of calculating the mean of a set of data, the average. That's something we already know how to do. And then we'll calculate the variance, and then we'll be able to calculate the standard deviation. So for example, let's look at number 1. The mean of a set of data, remember average is you take the sum of all of the data and divide by the number of pieces of data. Here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And just to speed things up, let's go ahead and use a calculator just to figure this out. So we have the sum of all of these and then divided by the number of pieces of data, which is 5. And we get the average is 20. So we'll say the mean of a set of data is 20. Now that we know what the mean is, we're going to go ahead and try to figure out what the variance is. So variance is using this formula. So we're going to take each value in the data set, subtract the mean that we just came up with, and square the quantity, add it to the next term, subtract the mean squared, and so on. So for the variance, in the numerator, I'm going to take the first term, or the first value in the data set, subtract the mean. We got 20, so we're going to subtract 20 and square it. Plus, take the second value, 14 minus 20, and square that. Plus, take 15 minus 20 squared, plus 19 minus 20 squared, plus the last term is 24, and squared. The denominator is the number or the size of the data set. In this case, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces of data in our set, so we'll divide by 5. All right, here we have 8 squared plus negative 6 squared plus negative 5 squared plus negative 1 squared plus 4 squared. All of that divided by 5. So 64 plus 36 plus 25 plus 1 plus 16. all divided by 5. Again, I'm going to use a calculator here to make things a little bit faster. So we have 64 plus 36 plus 25 plus 1 plus 16 is equal to 142, and then that divided by 5 is 28.4. So the variance is 28.4. And to calculate the standard deviation, again, we need to take the square root of the variance. So the square root of 28.4, if we use a calculator there, we get 5.3. So let's do just one more example of this. Number 2. So the mean of our data is the average of these numbers. So adding these all up and dividing by 4, because there's 4 numbers in our data set. So that's 20 plus 12 is 32. Divide that by 4. So our average is 8. Okay, so variance. Again, looking at our formula, we're going to take the first term or the first value in our data set, subtract the mean, and square it. Take the second value, subtract the mean, and square it. The third value here is 6, subtract the mean and square it. And the last value is 10, so 10 minus 8, and square that. The denominator is the number or the size of the data. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 values. So here we have negative 2 squared, which is 4. Positive 2 squared is 4. Negative 2 squared is 4. Positive 2 squared is 4. So 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4 is 16. Divide that by 4, and the variance is equal to 4. So nice numbers on this one. We don't even need our calculator. Standard deviation is the square root of the variance. In this case, that's equal to 2.